Tonight, we're going to begin a new lesson on the effects of sin on creation. And does everyone have a copy of this lesson? Anybody need one? Girls, you have to go way to the back and give them then one of these copies. I'm beginning with Romans 8, 18 to 22. And I need this read, and I'm going to begin in the back. Marv, it's your turn to begin.
Well, I consider that the sufferings of the present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits to repeat her longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to fertility, not willingly, but because of him who protected it in hope. I should stand up, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Hope 21, that the creation itself will be
You got to keep reading now that you're standing up.
set free from its bondage to the corruption and obtain the freedom and glory of the children of God. Verse 22, for we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly, and we wait eagerly for adoption as sons.
And you're doing such a good job. One moment.
The redemption of our bodies, for in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience.
Thank you, Marv. Really appreciate your reading in this passage. This passage is really central on the effects of sin in the creation. And we're really going to be looking at for the next few minutes at Romans 8:20, for the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it. So my first question is this: what is Paul referring to in this verse? And my first question under that is A, is he describing the default condition of the natural world? By that question, I'm asking you, is this how the natural world has always been? And I would like to have someone answer that, and you're going to have to answer with more than a yes or a no. I want to know your reason.
No,
And why no, Nikki?
because God created it perfectly, and things didn't change until after the sin, which is what I think it's referring to. And the creation was subjected to futility. That's when sin entered into it.
How many of you can agree with Nikki? She says no. This is when sin came into the world. I agree with all of you. I agree with you, Nikki, and I'm not surprised with your answer. You might be surprised there are theologians who would disagree. And we'll get into that with question number 3 pretty soon. Then this question: is Paul describing a sudden, drastic change in the natural world? And again, I submit that to my class.
I would say yes, because when Adam and Eve, they ate the fruit, sin entered the world.
Who would agree with Cain? You have always understood this is a sudden, abrupt change. I would agree with you, because that curse that comes in the 3rd chapter of Genesis is going to immediately impact the creation. Thank you, Caden. And so probably question 2 is pretty well answered already. When did this subjection to fertility take place?
Immediately.
Immediately when God speaks in Genesis chapter 3 to Adam and Eve. Thank you very much. We're going to read this for us, and it's Judy, right?
Yes.
Genesis 3:17 to 19.
And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
Thank you. And so there is an immediate change in the creation. It is subjective. Now the third question is this one. Why do some theologians reject this traditional view of Romans 8:18 to 25? You and I have been discussing the traditional view. But there are biblical scholars, there are biblical theologians, I'm going to put biblical in quotes, who say no. They are saying that this is not a change. They are saying this is the way the world, the creation has always been. Where does that have its root?
The view of trying to put like evolution in the Bible, trying to have stuff the earth create itself so we don't need a God, and that just getting intertwined with the Bible.
Who would agree with Caden? You see, an evolutionary model not only has to do with origins, an evolutionary model has to interpret everything that we see and experience in creation. Where does futility come in the evolutionary model? In the biblical model, futility comes in Genesis chapter 3. It comes in at the time of sin. Where does the futility, which we know is in our lives, in the creation, in the evolutionary model, where does futility, frustration come in?
It was always there.
That's right. The evolutionary model presents a world in which there has always been violence. You've heard it, the survival of the fittest, right? The most fit, strong, capable organisms survive. And your and my genealogy, I'm speaking from an evolutionary view, you and I are here because our ancestors were able to survive. They were able to kill off all the other organisms that were competing against them. So the evolutionary model is going to affect our whole understanding of the creation. And so these theologians, they embrace an evolutionary model. That violence and death have always been a part of the creation. So what does a person who believes that God used evolution to create the world, what do they do with this futility? Where are you going to put it? They're going to say that God had all of this survival of the fittest that was part of his plan, part of his will. How do you react to that? Is that okay? What problem does that present for you and me?
I don't know how it could be good if things are dying.
That's correct. At the end of every day, except day 2, at the end of every day, God saw all that he had made and it was good. And then you know that he looks at it on the 6th day and he says it is very good. And it's very good by what standard?
Perfection.
Perfection. It reflects God. This is my character. This is my wisdom. This is my glory. This is who I am. You're the same way. In your work, whatever your work is, you're going to look at it and say it is good because you're saying, this is who I am. This is how I want to be known. This is my wisdom. This is my glory. This is my power. Now, if you say God has placed violence and death all through the creation, how are you describing God? What kind of a God is he? He's a stumbling God. He does not create perfectly. Violence and death are part of his character. And so we have big problems with that. Another thing, these theologians embrace an evolutionary interpretation of the fossil record. When you look at fossils, how do you explain the fossil record? Why are there fossils?
Buried rapidly in the flood.
They were buried rapidly. No animal can fossilize unless it is covered immediately and completely and deeply enough that there can be no decay, and over a period of time all the silt that is around that animal solidifies, becomes rock, there's decay finally, and the fossil represents a perfect specimen of that animal. And so the evolutionary model is not of a flood model. It is saying, well, over many, many years there's sedimentation, this animal dies, and it's covered with sediment, and this takes millions of years. What's the problem if you go that route? Well, how many of you have seen a dead animal? And what happens if it takes, 100 years, unless it takes 100 years, let's say it takes 5 days for this animal to get covered. What happens to that animal in those 5 days?
Scavengers eat it, it gets decayed.
Scavengers, it decays, and in the fossil records, we have insects, their wings, perfectly preserved. These were not animals that died and over a period of time became covered and then fossilized. We understand the fossil record is a record of the flood. It's the evidence. But the evolutionary model is, no, this is a millions and millions of years, and these have formed over many years. And then you have another one, they embrace the presupposition. A presupposition means this is what I believe, and that's the basis for how I speak. And all of us have presuppositions. They embrace the presupposition that the present is the key to the past. And so when you dig up a fossil, then you look at this fossil, then you have to try to figure out, how did this fossil get here? What is its history? You and I do not believe the present is the key to the past. You and I believe revelation, the scripture, is the key to understanding the past. And that's why we embrace a flood. Okay, now I have this question. When Paul writes, for the creation was subjected to futility, what does subjected mean to you? Forced.
Put on,
Excellent. Need some more. Speak up.
It was giving something it didn't have, or it was given something it didn't have.
Given something it didn't have, and it was a pleasant thing or a difficult thing. Thank you for both of you. Literally, sub means under, ject means thrown, and so subjected means thrown under. We have this little phrase, thrown under the bus, right? That would be subjected. And so the creation was thrown under to futility. And of course, we have to look at Cambridge. That dictionary says, to defeat people or a country and then control them against their wishes and limit their freedom. The creation is placed in futility against its wishes to limit its freedom. Does that make sense to you? Everybody's okay with that? Then we have to go to Merriam-Webster. To cause or force to undergo or endure. I hear that in your answer, Kaden. And you endure something unpleasant, inconvenient, or trying. So the creation you and I are living in is being forced to be futile. And then there's always this wonderful dictionary that Noah Webster wrote in 1828. He was a godly man. And you can find this one online. And you can also buy copies of this dictionary. It says it's a participle, it's passive. What does passive mean?
Something happened to it.
That's right. It's done to it. I think all of us, except the Roses and the Hernandezes, were passive in getting dinner tonight, right? They did all the work. But it's reduced to the dominion of another. It is enslaved. It is exposed. It is submitted. It is made to undergo. Does that help clarify Romans 8:20? Then the next word is futility. What do you understand futility to be?
A waste.
A waste. You all agree with John? So you're saying the creation is subjected to waste? Everybody's okay with that? I think that's good. Literally, something that we say is futile, or it is futility, it's pointlessness, it's uselessness. And I think all of you moms who have tried to keep a clean house know what that's about when you have kids running around. Right? And you maybe have said, it's just futile. I just mopped this floor and now look. But our whole life is a life that is futile. It's always being repeated. It's got to be done again and again and again. You go to Cambridge. Cambridge says the fact of having no effect or of achieving nothing. Is that what you sense in your farming, in your keeping your lawn, in keeping your house, in all of your work? Do you sense it has no effect? Is this a depressing lesson? But is it true? All kinds of things we have to do it again and again and again. Here's Merriam-Webster. The state of serving no useful purpose. Completely ineffective. There's nothing lasting. Everything changes. Everything decays. Jesus says, don't store up treasures on earth where moth and rust, decay it, and thieves break through and steal. Then we go to Noah Webster in 1828, and he says, this is the second definition of that dictionary, the quality of producing no valuable effect or of coming to nothing, as the futility of measures or schemes. Is there anywhere in the Bible that supports the idea that the creation is subjected to futility? Which book of the Bible has a lot of theology that complements Romans 8:20? I think you will know. I need Leona. Can you see this?
Yes, I can even read it.
Then you're a winner on 2 counts.
Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun?
Thank you. What is Solomon talking about? Yes, sir.
Everything's pointless.
Everything is pointless. I think we really sense that at a funeral. You know, this person did all this work. Jim Stainer, a lot of us knew him. All the work he's done, he took care of Evergreen Cemetery for years and years. As I read the obituary, and Walt, his dad, took care of it before that. But it's all pointless, finally. It has no lasting value here on the earth. What does a man gain by all the toil of which he toils under the sun? How does that endure with us? We have another passage here. Janet, thank you.
I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forests of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house.
And you have to keep going.
I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man.
And you're doing such a good job.
So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity, and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun.
Thank you, Jan. Does that make sense to you? How many of you go shopping at the Well? Or Bibles for Missions? Great place to go, right? But where does all that stuff come from?
People donating their stuff.
People donating their stuff, people finish with their stuff, people who maybe have passed away, people who have to downsize, and they're moving into smaller quarters. We all understand this. Is that because of sin? And everybody said, yes. Adam and Eve were made to live forever on this earth. There is decay. There is change. Because there is futility. We look forward to a new heaven and a new earth. We look forward to bodies that are not moaning and groaning and that are going to get old. We're going to stay young. And our work is going to have lasting joy, lasting meaning. Everything we have today, we know it. I'm have to get rid of it. I'm going to leave it. It's going to belong to somebody else. And that's what Solomon is saying. I considered all that my hands had done, all the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, it's vanity. It's not lasting value. Well, 2 Chronicles 9, 21, 28 really talks about Solomon's wealth, and I just throw that in there, and I just want to know if we can get through this one. For the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Hiram. Once every 3 years, the ships of Tarshish used to come, bringing what is being shipped to Solomon. What's he ordered through Amazon?
New computer?
A new computer. If there had been one, he would have. I love your answer. What's one thing comes to your mind here?
Gold.
Who said gold is a winner? What's next?
Silver.
You're so smart.
Bronze.
Bronze? It's from an elephant. Ivory. Think of an animal.
Apes,
And think of another animal.
peacocks.
Yes. Verla, I thought you would come up with peacocks. She has peacocks, by the way. Thus King Solomon excelled all the kings of the earth in,
Wealth.
that's good,
Power.
and in wisdom. God gives him all of that. I think Solomon is a picture of Christ, of course, but he's also a picture of what our calling, our joy would be had sin not come into the world. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put into his mind. And every one of them brought his present, articles of silver and of gold, garments, myrrh, spices, horses, and mules, so much year by year. And Solomon had how many stalls for horses? It's a pretty long blank.
1,000?
Who said that? You are really close. Oh, what did I do? 4,000. And he had 4,000 chariots. How many horsemen?
1,000?
Multiply that times 3.
1,200?
What's 4 times 3?
12.
That's right, on a Sunday evening. 12,000 horsemen whom he stationed in the chariot cities with the king in Jerusalem. And he ruled over all the kings from the Euphrates, that's where Abram grew up, to the land of the Philistines, to the border of
Egypt.
how far south? Did I hear it?
Egypt.
You're perfect. This is all Solomon's. And Solomon says, it's all pointless. It has no lasting value. Because I have to give it up. I cannot maintain it. All right. And the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as...
Dirt?
Dirt, you said? I'm going to let you win on that. It's stone. And he made cedar as plentiful as the sycamore of the Shephelah. And the horses were imported for Solomon from Egypt and from all lands. That's just an amazing thing. Yes, Dan.
So, when the Israelites wanted a king, God gave them 3 commands that the king was not to do.
And one of them is?
I think all 3 of them we've just seen up on the screen.
Speak
He was
up.
not supposed to go to Egypt to get horses. He gathered gold and silver for himself, and the concubines, correct?
You are a good man. And you will read about Solomon, that is.
But
Yeah.
further, Solomon was the 3rd king. He violated all 3, and then the kingdom was split because of that. And then Solomon, when he gets older, writes in Ecclesiastes, it's all meaningless.
Does that make sense to you? He's still the wisest man. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you. All right, number 6. How does not willingly shape our understanding of the created world we are living in and experiencing today? Katie,
It was by mistake, not choice.
it was by what?
Mistake, not choice.
Would you explain mistake to me?
Well, okay, I guess I should say disobedience.
It's by disobedience. I like your answer. The creation was and continues to be passive in its being subjected to futility. This is not creation's will, not creation's choice, not creation's desire. Creation, as we read earlier, Marv read that to us, is moaning and it's groaning. Just like you and I do as we get older. We moan and we groan because we are too not willingly being subjected to futility. All the diseases and all of these things that we have are not the choice creation made. God subjected it to frustration and continues to keep it in subjection. Now, we can look at our scientific, progress we're making, and we're always looking for ways to alleviate some of our moaning and groaning and frustration, but it's there. And as our ability to, live longer, and I think we all know that, people are reaching 90 much more frequently today than they were 50 years ago. But along with that comes more moaning and groaning. Things which we have today that people died before they reached that particular place. And so I want to say this. We are not victims of a broken and futile creation. Never look at that way. It's the opposite. The creation is a victim of our sin and disobedience. We, blame viruses, and we blame storms, and we blame all kinds of things, but it is God subjecting the creation to these things which they come upon us. And that's what I have here. We experience storms because of our disobedience, drought because of our disobedience, cold and heat, sickness, disease, rot, decay, and weakness and aging and death because Adam's sin brought God's curse on his perfect creation. That's the biblical view of all of these things in our life which torment us, which affect us. And so, when you have a storm, understand this is because of man's sin. God subjected creation to futility, and our work is futile. Starving goat. That animal suffers because of man's sin. I am guilty. You have flooded. Again, it's not a creation's desire. It is subjected to futility. It's our sin that brings that on. And you that are farmers and you work with animals with diseases, again, the same thing. The creation moans and groans under the curse. And so, Colossians 1:19 and 20, Jude.
For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross.
Thank you. I don't want this class to be all negative, but Christ is reconciling to himself what things? All things. Not just human beings, not just our hearts. He's doing the whole thing. It's important to understand that Jesus came to redeem and reconcile not just fallen humanity, but a fallen cosmos that is awaiting restoration. You know Revelation 21 verse 5. Jesus says, "Behold, I am making all things new." He's not making all new things. He's making all things new. They're going to be restored to their original that God created during creation week. And we have this passage, Janet.
God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life.
Thank you. The word world comes from the word cosmos. That's all animals, it's all plants, it's all water, it's air, it's mountains, it's all the planets, it is all the galaxies. The whole creation is moaning and groaning, not just the earth. All of it is. And God so loved the world, his creation, that Christ has paid the penalty for man's sin, and there's going to be the new creation, which is this one, restored. Now you may turn your paper over to the back. And what effect did sin have on the creation? And I'm using Genesis 3:18. Ken.
It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plant of the field.
Thank you. You are very familiar with this passage. And so, my first question, well, here's thorns. I'm not going to say anything. Is that okay? See all these thorns? I said I wasn't going to say anything. Here they are. These are nettles. God created each large stinging hair, which is a tiny glass needle with a hollow tube with walls of silica. The bulb at the base of each hair contains the stinging liquid of formic acid and histamine. When brushed against it, the fragile tips of the glassy hairs are easily broken, leaving a sharp point to effectively pierce the skin to inject the sting. These are specifically designed by God to hurt you. Would you agree?
Yes.
Thank you. Love it. Is there any benefit from thorns?
Protects the plant.
It protects the plant. You are right. And it protects.
The animals that live inside you.
This bird's pretty safe. You boys are not going to climb up there, are you?
I will.
I'm going to pick one of these fruits. This is amazing. There is a delicious jelly made from prickly pear cactus. It's called the crown of thorns in the Philippines. These are thorny lianas in Nepal. And this is a, I don't know whether I'm saying it right, ceiba tree in Central America. And thorny trees in Bolivia. All over the world, you have these thorns. And I'm just showing you a whole bunch of them. Because I think this is basic to understanding where we're going with this stuff. Number 7. Were thorns a characteristic of the original plant kind? What do you say?
No.
And why do you say no?
Because when sin happened, the thorns were produced.
I think you'll have a lot of people agree with you. Do you? All right. On what basis, looking at Genesis 3:18, do you stand, I forget what your name is. Josiah. On what basis do you agree with Josiah? Caden.
Well, thorns are there to protect the plants from being eaten from other creatures, or even just like a man trying to pull them out of the ground. He's not going to grab a plant with a bunch of thorns on it.
I love your answer. What does "it will produce thorns and thistles" mean to you?
It didn't previously.
It did not previously. It's something that does not exist, but it will exist. It will produce implies there will be something in the future which is not here now. Anybody want to challenge that? Then I have this wonderful question. Did God create additional kinds of plants in Genesis 3 when he says it will produce thorns and thistles? He's talking about the ground.
No, he was done creating.
He was done creating.
I think the existing stuff that he made, that's what got the thorns and the thistles to make life more difficult for everyone.
The existing plants would produce thorns and thistles. Anybody want to challenge Earl or Nikki? I love how we people think here. Read this for us, please.
Thus the heaven and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done.
Thank you. That is very significant in answering this question. God does not create any new plants because the creation perfectly reflected his glory, his power, his wisdom, his pleasure, and so it will produce thorns and thistles. They must come from the existing creation. We have this little bit of detail. He had completed his revelation of himself on day 7. And I want to say it that way because the creation is the revelation of God. We see his power, his glory. There was no new information added to genetic material of any cell after day 7. Cells do not gain information. Cells lose information. Cells do not gain information. Somebody wrote a book, "In the Beginning Was Information." I really like that title because all of the DNA in Adam and Eve we have all of that expressed today in all the people of the world. Hair color, eye color, skin color, whatever. Thorns are basically leaf mutations of the original plant kinds. They're mutations. What is a mutation?
A loss of
Some
information?
Christians are scared of the word mutation because they think it's the same as evolution. Joe?
She was the one.
I'm sorry.
I said a loss of information?
Mutation is a loss of information. We don't know what 2 cats came off of the ark, but all the cats of the cat family today are mutations of those 2 cats. The cat kind did not gain information so that we have lions and tigers and cheetahs and puff if they lose information so that the traits are exposed. Thorns are leaf mutations that were in the DNA of the original world. And I just see we're going to have to... Could God have created the information for thorns into the DNA of the original kinds, but kept it dormant until the curse? Don't be afraid to speak.
Yes, God can do all things, so he could have.
Did God know Adam and Eve were going to sin?
Yes.
Did God know the curse would be expressed in the creation? Yes. So I think it's a very, very good answer. Since God knew sin would come into the world, he could have prepared the plants with the information to produce thorns when he created them on day 3. And so he speaks, it will produce thorns. It has all the information. I gave it that DNA for it to be. And question 12 is going to, I guess, question 10. That's where we will start 2 weeks from tonight, and I'll be adding more material to this. I really enjoy teaching you, and really thank you for all of your wonderful answers. Thank you. Let us pray together. Our Father, we look into your creation. We look into your wisdom, into your knowledge, knowing that you do all things, you know all things, you know the end from the beginning. And so as we study the effects of sin and this world that we live in, which is your discipline on us, which always reminds us of our sin, but it also reminds us that Christ came to redeem this world, and we look forward to that world in which all sin, all suffering, death, disease, futility is removed. May we with joy look forward to that day. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.